Thank you for tuning in to the Hope.Strength.Courage podcast, love and support for parents whose kids are fighting for their lives. A weekly podcast created to support parents and caregivers of children diagnosed with cancer, where you will find resources collected to help you face each day with hope, strength, and courage. From interviews with the top experts in their fields, doctors, psychologists, chaplains, and inspiring frontline workers in pediatric oncology as they share their best advice, as well as day-to-day advice collected from other cancer moms and leaders in personal growth and development. From individuals who understand how hard it can be, I hope you will feel better prepared to cope with the day-to-day challenges of caring for your child. Hi, I am Laura Lane, and I am your host. My own daughter Celeste was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 12. In 2015, I wrote about our experiences in the book, Two Mothers, One Prayer, Facing Your Child's Cancer with Hope, Strength, and Courage. Since that time, I have dedicated thousands of hours to share with other parents and caregivers the resources, tools, tips, and skills and strategies I learned that helped our family stay happier, healthier, and more hopeful. My goal is to share with you my interviews with experts to support you as you care for a child with cancer. This week, before I introduce today's interview, I'd like to tell you about the projects I've been working on to better support you as a cancer parent and the sponsor partners who are helping to make it happen. I am most excited to tell you about our partnership with Royal Bank of Canada and Ronald McDonald House Charities, South Central Ontario, where we are donating 100 copies and launching our Stronger Daily Planner for the most amazing moms on the planet. Everything you need to stay sane while caring for a child with cancer. A daily, weekly, monthly tracker for all things childhood cancer related. A planner to keep track of diagnosis, treatment plans, symptoms, medications, reactions, food intake, blood count tracker, plus everything else you need to keep track of for your family at home. If you would like to learn more or inquire about how to order your copy or how to sponsor copies for families at your local hospital, please visit our website, strongerplanner.com. This project has been made possible with the funding help of the Royal Bank of Canada, Ronald McDonald House Charities, South Central Ontario, to help us to distribute the planners, the design expertise of Mockingbird Designs, and impressive printing in Hamilton, Ontario. Our other exciting news is our 30-minute free webinar series, Coping Skills for Cancer Moms, hosted every Friday at 12 p.m. North American Eastern Time. I hope you will join me each week as I cover one of 7 pillars to living with grace and ease. My goal is to share the valuable skills I learned when our daughter Celeste was diagnosed, give you a short activity to help you to apply the skill, then open things up for questions, all in less than 30 minutes. If you are struggling right now, this might be just what you need to help you feel loved and supported and give you the strength you need to carry on one more day, one more week, one more month. To learn more, please visit my website, lauralane.ca. Now for today's episode, which features part 2 of my interview with NLP practitioners Jackie Nagy and Ed Olvera. In part 1, Jackie and Ed gave us an overview of neuro-linguistic programming, and we discussed how to use NLP and breathing to manage daily stress. This week, Jackie goes into detail of her 4 steps to shift from overwhelm to intentional, resourceful living. I hope you will enjoy this interview as much as I did. I'm pleased to formally introduce you to Edward Olvera and Jackie Nagy. Edward has been working in behavioral health, social work, and the life coaching field for the past 4 decades. He met John Grinder in 1983 with an initial training in the patterns of hypnosis and the genius of Dr. Milton Erickson. In 1989, he was introduced to the new code NLP in a residential practitioner training in Syracuse, California, and later participated in trainer trainings and coacher certifications. He has worked in a wide array of settings, including schools, wilderness programs, hospitals, social services, outpatient clinics, and private practice. In 2016, Edward launched a life coaching practice, Choice Inspirations, a service to help you become your best you. Jackie Nagy is your Be Yourself coach. She's a professional speaker and member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, CAPS Manitoba, a certified new coach, neuro-linguistic programmer, master and trainer adult educator and coach. Jackie shares the how-to practice tools so people can gracefully coach themselves under pressure. Jackie is the owner of Holistic Directions Incorporated and offering live NLP certification trainings to give individuals, coaches, leaders, and parents the life-changing skills that no one ever shows you to live a more happy and authentic life. Jackie's mission is to flip the model of teaching and the theoretical what and why in the field of self-development into teaching the practical how-to skills that families can live more healthier, holistic, and autonomous lives.
So I have a four-step process, if I may quickly give to parents as something that they can begin to consider and start practicing when it's possible. And I would suggest practicing this by checking in on themselves throughout the day. Now, we have this wonderful technology. There could be a way of setting a timer for this, or setting a reminder on the fridge, or in any kind of way, checking in on ourselves to notice what is our breathing. How am I breathing right now? And if we notice the feeling is up in the upper body, that's a sign that we're not in a resourceful state. Right? And then asking, so acknowledging, oh, I'm not breathing very well right now. And so I would suggest that's when we take the 3 deep breaths, even 1 deep breath, but 3 is really great. And then asking the question to themselves, what is my intention? What is my intention right now in this very moment? What do I want to happen right now for myself and the person that I'm with? And then asking what state would be more resourceful than the one I just discovered myself in. So if I find myself up here and I'm feeling anxious, fearful, whatever, okay, what if instead I was calm? What if instead I was thinking more about myself versus the other person, or the other person versus me, or a third party? What if I got out of myself and started out of my head even and started thinking, okay, great. And then the 4th step is shifting the state into the more resourceful one. Now this is where Edward and I are going to be teaching how to shift state more quickly. It is something that it is kind of a muscle that you can develop. Mm-hmm. The very ability to shift one state to the other is, I think, another leverage point in the field of NLP. And so, but knowing that we all have had moments from our past where we have been calm, where we have been maybe attentive in a different way, not to suggest parents are not compassionate, but sometimes the compassion is not placed where they'd like it to be. Mm-hmm. And just decide, wow, I can do that. And how? What does that feel like? What does that, what could I be doing differently? And then start slowly shifting yourself into the new state and using the breathing as the mechanism by which to get there.
Okay. Awesome.
All right.
So
any questions about that?
Well, what I was thinking actually was, I'm glad that you're going to show us that, because there are times when we're in a state and you can't tell somebody, stop being afraid.
Right.
And then automatically, oh, okay, you told me to, I'll stop. You need a process to take.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I wish it did. But, yeah.
Yeah. So and it's interesting because it could be the exact opposite. Some people actually fall into a very calm state and get stuck in the calm, disassociated state.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right? When, especially with couples, sometimes couples will be kind of doing the opposite. Mm-hmm. And so one might say, would you please do something? Come on, I need you now. Yeah. It could be the opposite. I need you to kind of take charge. And so it could be, completely different. So this is very, very important. And I'm really delighted that this will be part of the training course that we're going to be offering.
Oh, awesome.
So I have a second of the 4 points that we're going to be talking about, and that is, the building and nourishing of self-care. And we know we had a conversation, Laura, with you, Laura, ahead of time, and talking about just how important it is to ensure that you are connected with some support groups.
Mm-hmm.
And, you talked about how you, in fact, are leading the way in developing formats for parents to come on board, as you have been through so much yourself in what the parents are currently going through. And so I just want to say kudos to you for doing that. It's a big job, and I really think you're really serving the world in such a wonderful way. So that's not something that I'm necessarily going to talk about. What I do want to talk about more is about the self-care.
Okay.
When there's, I like to say, when there's no option to call a friend.
Mm-hmm.
There's moments where you feel all alone. It could be 3 a.m. It could be just you feel as though you've tapped out all your resources and you just don't want to make one more ask for help. So this is kind of, for me, also an important piece of the puzzle. So I have my program, the coaching program, includes within it a daily ritual, morning and evening, and I have 10 steps. I know it sounds like a lot. I have 10 steps in the morning that I do and suggest my clients do. Here's the good news. I don't suggest we need to do them all every single day.
Okay.
So if I get up in the morning and I feel a certain way, I decide, well, I'm good, a little bit better than yesterday. I'm going to do 2 or 3 really important ones. And then maybe a few days later, I'm just overwhelmed and I wake up feeling and I notice my state and I think, wow, I'm going to go through all 10 of those steps today. Today's a big day. So for today, I wanted to introduce 3 of them. And I, at this point, wanted to quickly mention at the end of the call, I'm going to give an option for any of the listeners who want all 10 to send me an email, and I will gladly send that out. There's totally free of charge.
Well, thank you. That's
a gift to the listeners. Yeah, you're welcome. So the 3 that I chose that I think are really important, and I think these are ones that parents can do easily, are, first of all, setting your intention for the day. So what I do is, and this is a practice I've developed over a bit of time, as soon as I put my feet out of the bed and touch the floor, I think about my intention for the day. And I have been working on intentional living since I had my NLP training in 2008. I think even before that, but now I have a structure to actually make it happen more tangibly. So I think about my intention in 3 different levels. Sometimes it's a really, really, really high level. For example, being the most loving person I can be. So it's very broad, it's very big, and it's at a very high level. And I might wake up and put my feet on the floor and say, that's what I want to be today. That's my intention for today. Or it could be kind of midstream, like being a helpful support person to another person. Maybe today's my day. I have a little bit of time. I'm going to support someone else the way they've supported me.
Mm-hmm.
So notice I'm not defining how I'm going to be loving or how I'm going to be supporting, but I'm setting the intention for that to happen. And so much can fit within it.
Mm-hmm.
And the third could be a very kind of a lower intention, like, wow, today I'm going to really pay attention and take care of my own well-being. I feel that I've really stretched myself the last couple of weeks. I'm going to take some time today for me. So that's my intention. Then, and I also encourage people, if they like to journal, they can write that out. Then the second step would be paying attention to that breathing or some kind of wordless movement. The wordless is really important. This is not about repeating a mantra, not that I think it's a really great exercise. This is really simply about suspending any internal dialogue and just exploring our breath. Or it could be moving. Some people like to run, some like to ski, some people like yoga. And I would encourage people, if they're listening to music, that it's instrumental music. So just remove the language and focus on the breathing. And the research is showing 10 to 15 minutes is a really great time to do that. And then what I do is within that 10 to 15 minutes, what I focus on is my intention.
Mm.
So I more so, instead of words, would see images. I might hear how I'm going to be more loving, hear my voice as I'm supporting another person, see myself doing actions that will fit that intention. Maybe with well-being, I see myself choosing healthier foods. So I go through that process 10 to 15 minutes. That's the second one. And then the third one would be more of the tangible things that I'm pretty sure many of your parents are already doing. More so around the outcomes for the day and the goals and the tasks and the list.
Right.
What I find is a lot of times we wake out of bed and we go right to the list. What do I have to do today? And sometimes if we do that last, we can look at that list and go, well, you know, there's a few things on this list that really aren't going to serve my intention for today. And if I really want to do that, because it's so important for me to focus on my intention, I'm going to take those things off my list and put them on tomorrow's list.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to balance out where you're spending your energy and performing in a way that is far more in alignment with your true authentic self, what you really want for yourself and your family.
Oh, that sounds like a great way to start the morning.
Yeah. Start the morning the way that you want the day to end.
Mm-hmm. So from here then, what can you share with us, Edward? I'm assuming, Jackie, that was the 4 steps you've just gone through. That those are terrific. Edward, what's the next step?
Well, I sort of want to start with perhaps especially the families that are feeling overwhelmed. And so when you're in the state of overwhelm or feeling that I think it's a good idea to start with movement. So rather than try to have any kind of thought about anything, get yourself moving. Do something that helps relieve some stress, whether you walk, whether you stretch, whether you do Pilates, go to the gym, something that gets your body moving so that you can, kind of generate the blood flow and the respiration sort of naturally to move yourself to some release of the tension and that sense of overwhelm. So the very process that Jackie just went through, which I think is fabulous, perhaps is the second step when you feel, that it's you're over your head and you're not quite sure what to do,
Mm-hmm.
to give yourself a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Now, Jackie had mentioned about and was talking about the support system, and through my career, I've realized that specialized support is really, really important, which is why I think what you're doing is so critically important. And let me broaden the example a little bit. If you have an addiction, the kind of support that's really critically important is other folks that have addictions that have gotten through it. The thing about NLP is that NLP studies success. So it's not just that you've had a similar experience. The best of all worlds is to find people who have lived through it and found their way through it on the other side that, are thriving in some way. So your resource to families, I think, is so, so important. I'm an adoptive parent, and unless you've raised kids that have been adopted, you really don't understand what an adoptive parent goes through.
Right.
So to get that kind of support, we have found to create a network of folks that are living through what we're living through. You can go on and on, whether you have issues with depression or anxiety or those kinds of things that have become overwhelming to you. Finding that sort of support that helps, kind of creates an instant understanding of what you're going through without judgment and that sort of thing. So just just kind of recap that piece of the support. We all perceive the world in different ways. Now, we all see, hear, and feel. Some of us are emphasize one over the other. Some people visualize really well. Some people hear really well and maybe self-talk, and that's the way they think, in quotes. Others, and much like myself, I need to feel, so I've got to move. I've got to do something in order to start to really think. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one thing that's really important with whether we call it stress management or optimizing our state is kind of starting with what works best for you, but also learning to expand your abilities and to overlap from one to the other. Understanding that really, when all is said and done, it's all operating at the same time. There's no really one thing over the other. And in this regard, how do we create comfort? How do we create relaxation? In instances where it's stressful and it's difficult, even the thought of having fun may not, it's like maybe we shouldn't have fun. But if we can have some fun or we can have some laughter, what does that do to our state? And are we going to be more prepared for that moment in order to meet the demands that we're going through from any one given point to another? Sometimes just something as simple as sitting and resting for a minute is what you need in the middle of the day, or some part of the day that helps kind of recharge your battery so that you can meet those demands. Mm-hmm. Jackie had made some reference to this earlier about, and I think it's everybody kind of knows this stuff, because what NLP does is it studies kind of what works in real life as opposed to creating something on top of it. Now, in order to teach it, you have to create some format, but for the most part, what NLP teaches is what works in the world and what's been discovered. Mm-hmm. So, finding people such as yourself, honestly, in this context of a family that has a child that's so critically ill in this way, how kind of get through the day. And I know in our pre-conversation to today, that idea that from day to day, you don't really know what you're doing. You could be at the hospital, you could be traveling, yeah. And this is not even to say all the normal things and demands that we have with our lives to begin with. Yeah. Relationships, children, development. I mean, all of that is a plate full without this additional stress. So in one sense, this is, an impossible task, and yet maintaining one state makes all the difference. So one way I like to think about this is, you're working late and you're tired and you're trying to get something done, and you're going a mile a minute, or I should say this, you're going very slowly and very confused or very stressed, and you decide, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to get some rest, and you get a good night's rest, and you wake up the next morning, and what you might have been working through for 2 or 3 hours is done in 20 minutes or an hour. Mm-hmm. So that's the essence of state, and as you have brought up, and as we help people, Jackie and I, and those who use this form of helping people, it's the how. How do you go from one state to another? I think Jackie made some reference to this while she was talking, but how do you kind of remove yourself from the situation while you're in the situation? And the importance of doing that, whether you call it a break, whether you take a kind of a mental moment to pull yourself out of the situation, sort of the bird's eye view. Most of us have the experience that when we think of somebody else's life or somebody else's stress that we're not involved in, so our feelings are not there, it's so much easier to get a handle on what it is that needs to be done.
Mhm.
And we're in the middle of it, it's so hard to do that. And so one of the aspects of NLP is teaching us how to do that, how to pull ourselves out of the situation, to kind of take an overview and figure out what's the best move here. If you think about any game of sports, there's always the pre-plan for how you're going to play the game that day, and then you're in the middle of the game, and that's called a timeout. And on the sideline, rethinking your game plan so you can figure out where now, given what's unfolded in terms of what goes on. And I think our days from day to day are much like that.
Mhm.
And those moments, those brief moments, and this is also where I think the support piece comes in. Can you reach out to somebody who in your support network that really understands what you're going through, so that you can kind of have that sense of comfort, that sense of reassurance, that feeling of support that you're not in this alone. And I would actually like to hear what you would say about this, but I think that's one of the challenges of living through a stressful time like this, in this kind of situation with your child, that you may feel like you're all alone. And could you speak to that for just a moment?
Well, there's first one thing that came up as you were talking that I was thinking about with our children when they have a meltdown, when things aren't going well for them, and we have to give them a timeout, and we send them up to their room and say, you need a timeout, go and spend 2 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, of course, depending on the age of the child. I think as adults, sometimes I wish there was someone who would give me a timeout and say, go to your room, and I could actually go and spend that quiet time. So if you're providing a tool for us to have a mental timeout, so that, because as parents, it just, you feel like, especially when your child is sick, and if you have other children at home, I have 3 other children, as well as my daughter who had cancer. And so I just felt pulled in so many different directions. I felt that I would love for someone to say, Laura, go and have a timeout. If I can have an hour in my room by myself, yay!
Okay, let it hereby be declared that you must have a timeout on a regular basis, because that's what really kind of helps us rejuvenate, regenerate our resourceful state.
And that's what we forget.
That's the natural form of what we're doing in NLP. We're facilitating this, and it is powerful, but absolutely. And I think of it as this kind of timeout, as opposed to go to your room kind of timeout. I teach this all the time, that it's so important to take a timeout. And sometimes it's a timeout in the middle of a stressful moment. As a parent, I have 8 children, so I've been around this block a few times. So, the realization I have come to is that the challenge with parenting is really frustration on our part, that managing our own frustration, which is managing our state, is the difference that makes the difference in terms of how well we do that parenting. And so these timeouts are so important. And I've said to people, I don't know if it's thousands of times, but certainly hundreds of times, you need to go on the timeout. That's the most important timeout going. The child will do fine. Once you're resourceful again, then you'll know what to do. And I think that's, what our message is today. You manage your state, you optimize your state, you have a how-to do that, and you make a commitment to doing that. Now, this goes back quite a while when I was in my very early career. I was working 16 hours a day and trying to be self-employed and not doing well. I didn't get the piece about collecting money, so my budget wasn't so good at the end of the day. So I had to take a break from everything for a period of time, just to kind of gain a sense of well-being again. And out of that, I realized that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't help anybody else. Mm-hmm. So it's critically important, and to do that and to do the very thing that you're talking about and have moves that you do. For me, I like to do some version of workout because, and if you think about this, I like to use this example, and this has to do with state, where you can, you're really stressed about something and you walk or you run a mile. Okay, you may feel a little bit better, but maybe not quite there. And if you're really into this as the thing you like to do, 2 miles or 3 miles or 4 miles, whatever it is that your distance is, somewhere at the end of that, your state changes. You didn't talk to anybody. You didn't problem solve necessarily. Now, you had a lot of maybe things going through, thinking about, saying to yourself, but in the end, it just kind of released by your activity. Now, I think the very same thing is true that if you pick up the phone in the moment of, or at a time of distress, and you talk to somebody, not about your stress, but just about them, about life, about, any number of things, that's a moment where you can really change your state because you feel better, and in that moment, or in the case of breathing, you just sit for a moment, you take a few nice deep breaths, and all things shift. I have a thing that I come about saying, changing your state changes everything, and that is really what's to go to in order to get a change.
This interview really was packed with steps, habits, and resources we can use as parents. One of the things I loved about Jackie's 4 steps in this part of the interview was when she explained that breathing can be used as a mechanism to shift ourselves from one state to another, from fear to calm, or from inaction to action. When she also talked about the 10 habits of her morning and evening self-care routine, it was a reminder to me to get back into my habits as well. I hope you will take Jackie up on her offer. If you send her an email, she will send you a copy of all 10 habits. I really appreciate that after those 4 steps, Ed brought us back to what we can do when we are in overwhelm. Again, how to move from one state to another. And that leads us into part 3 of the interview, when next week, Ed will be sharing an amazing guided meditation with us. In the meantime, to learn more about Jackie and Ed, please visit their website at holisticdirections.com. Before we end our show today, we have one last segment. Over the last few years, I have asked other cancer moms what advice they had wished they had known when their child was first diagnosed. I have compiled that information and will be sharing their advice each week. You can download the top 101 pieces of advice that I put together as a mini ebook at twomothers1prayer.com. Today's advice comes from Tiffany. That's so hard because I wanted to know what was coming, but the Lord gave it to us one day at a time. That's all we could handle. So my advice would be one day at a time. Thanks, Tiffany, for sharing that. If you have advice you have learned along the way that you wish someone had told you weeks, months, or years earlier, I invite you to fill out the contact form on our website, twomothers1prayer.com, and I will be sharing your advice with our listeners on future shows. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today to listen to the Hope, Strength, Courage podcast. I look forward to sharing more experts and advice with you again next Wednesday. Please remember to take a minute to subscribe to the show. Thanks also need to go out to our Hope, Strength, Courage production team, which consists of my wonderful assistant Tracy Ogilvy McDonald, Andrew Braun at Braun Audio and Audio Geek, music by Fizz Anthony, social media support by Marife Constantino, and graphic design by Amy Hossman. To learn more about myself, Laura Lane, and to order my book, please visit lauralane.ca.